been nearly a year since I painted my dashboard red, and since the original video has got some attention recently, I figured now would be a good time to do a follow-up and show you guys how the dashboard has held up since then. You guys left me a lot of great questions and feedback on the original video, so I want to talk about what went right, what went wrong, and what I might do differently if I could do this project again. So let's get the big question out of the way: does the color match? Yes. No. So it's not perfect, but it's close enough for me, and I'm going to preface this section by saying that I don't have any relationship with color bond paint, so it makes no difference to me what brand of paint you guys buy. But I'll also say that I'm very particular with everything that I do to my car, and if I truly thought that it looked like or if it was a really obvious mismatch like from the driver's seat, I wouldn't have signed off on it. I definitely wouldn't have kept it in the car as long as I have. But what I'll say about it is that it's as close as you're going to get for an off-the-shelf rattle can. So there's a few variables to keep in mind here. First of all, the car is 8 years old, so the rest of the interior, the seats and all that have had 8 years of UV exposure compared to something that was freshly painted less than a year ago. There's a material difference. The dashboard part that I painted is made out of ABS plastic, whereas the seats and door card inserts are leather, so there's a difference there. And even if I clean the leather and put like the moisturizer on it, even that will have a difference of how closely the dash matches the rest of the interior. I will say though that the biggest difference came from the clear coat. Before clear coating it, it looked like a perfect spot on match as far as the color and the sheen, but after the clear I did notice that it was slightly more glossy and slightly more saturated despite being the matte clear finish that I got. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're going to clear coat it, which is something that they recommend as far as durability and UV resistance. Now there were a lot of you in the comments that said that you had a beige interior and you just wanted to paint it black, and in that case you don't have to worry about anything that I just talked about, but if you are going to buy one of their OEM colors to match your existing interior, I would say if it's close enough for me, it's probably close enough for most people. How did the paint hold up, and is it going to flake or chip? I haven't had any issues with mine so far, but this is the underside of the dash, so it's not really a normal contact surface, it's just maybe occasionally it gets bumped into, but haven't had any issues with that. Since painting it, I am more aware of things touching the dashboard, and one thing that I've noticed recently is that whenever my friends ride in my car, they always sit spread eagle, which is so weird. Like they plop down in the seat and just spread their legs as wide as possible, where their knee is like touching that center part of the dash, but even with that, I haven't had any issues with durability. My wife's purse has these big metal handles that'll sometimes plop over and touch the dashboard, but that hasn't really been a problem, nor has our huge American-sized drinks that will sometimes hit the underside of the radio part. Haven't had any issues with that either. I'll even vacuum the dashboard sometimes with this brush attachment, which has kind of stiff bristles, and even that hasn't been a problem. Since painting the dash last fall, the car's been exposed to temperatures as cold as 0 degrees Fahrenheit last winter and as hot as 100 degrees Fahrenheit this summer, and hasn't had any issues with flaking or cracking or anything like that. And I really think it all comes down to following their instructions word for word, just taking your time with the prep. And remember, BMW sprays these from the factory, obviously not with rattle cans, but a similar application process. Does it make the car smell like paint? It did for a few weeks. The smell is completely gone now, almost a year later, but luckily for me, I have a garage, so after I painted it, I was able to park in here and put the windows down overnight for a few weeks until the smell went away. I think because I did it so late in the season where it was already kind of cold out, I think that prolonged the degassing process, but definitely if you have a garage where you can leave your windows down when you're done, that will help out a lot. Is it better to use spray paint or dye? Now this is a great question because I actually bought the dye first after seeing someone on Reddit do the same, but after doing a little bit more research, I found the ColorBond spray paint and it seemed to be exactly what I was looking for. What I liked about it is that their kit was a complete system that included the prep cleaner, adhesion promoter, paint, and clear coat with detailed step-by-step instructions that didn't leave anything to chance, whereas the dye was just a bottle of dye. What's the best way to get it from the bottle onto the dashboard? Brush, sponge, use thinner and put it in a spray gun? If I sponged it on like the bottle said to, would it leave a texture? What kind of prep would I need to do? This stuff probably would have worked too, but there just wasn't a clear path to get it from the bottle onto the dashboard like there was with the spray paint. So I'm not an expert with this stuff, and hopefully someone can weigh in the comments below, but my guess is that the dye is probably better for leather and flexible surfaces, whereas the spray paint, based on what I read, is probably best for rigid, hard surfaces like the dashboard in my case. Can you paint it inside the car? I would advise against that. You're underestimating just how messy the spray paint is, and not only that, but you're just not going to have enough room in there to be able to paint every surface and get an even coat on everything. I know that people don't want the hassle of taking the dashboard out of the car, understandably so, but you already have to remove the steering wheel, vents, trim, and radio faceplate just to have a clear view of the dash, and once you take all that stuff off, you're really halfway to taking the whole thing out anyway. So the first mistake was painting it inside my house. It ended up making a huge mess, and even a year later I'm still finding red dust on things. My wife will tell me to go downstairs to grab something and I'm like wiping the red paint dust off of it, and it ended up making the house stink like paint the whole time I was working. So the problem was with the car taken apart here in the garage, I didn't want to try reconnecting the battery with all those crazy wires and everything unplugged and then trying to move it like that. I just didn't want to mess with that. And then that would have meant that I would have had to get a car cover to cover that, and I would have had to mask off everything in here. So at the time, the basement just seemed like a better idea. But after the fact, I did see on Amazon they have these spray painting tents where you could set up outside and you wouldn't have to worry about the weather or the bugs or pollen or anything like that, and all the overspray would be contained. So if I were to do this project again, I would definitely spend the $40 on one of those tents. I think that that would have been the perfect solution for this. As far as technique, something that I found out the hard way is that the color red tends to be hard to paint just because of poor coverage, and after the fact, a few of my painter friends reached out to me and said it probably would have been better to do a beige base coat first rather than trying to go right from the black to the red. So had I done beige, I could have used less paint, fewer coats, and it would have taken less time. So I went through 3 full cans of the red paint, and I mean like use the entire can like it's gasping for air. So had I started with the beige, I probably would have only needed half a can of beige and half a can of red, and I would have had plenty of paint left over for future touch-ups. Another technique mistake that I made is that I basically just painted it from the bottom, and the underside ended up with more paint than the front and the top. I really should have pulled the table away from the wall where I could have walked 360 degrees around it and sprayed from every angle. It's not terrible, but if I'm nitpicking, there are a couple areas where the coverage is a bit light compared to the rest of the dash. And like I mentioned in the last section, I don't have any extra paint to fix it. Also worth mentioning for anyone who's going to do this at home, do yourself a favor and get the little spray trigger that goes on the top of the can. That would have made a world of difference. Throughout the project, like my fingertip and my wrist were just burning from trying to hold this little button down. But yeah, like I physically ran out of hand strength and I'd have to switch between my thumb and my index finger. I think anyone who's ever spray painted knows exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, get yourself the trigger and it's going to be a lot better. Finally, as a few people pointed out, the N95 mask that I was wearing wasn't really sufficient for this job. Whenever you're working with automotive grade paints, you should really wear a respirator. I know it's one more kind of expensive thing to have to buy, but you shouldn't put a price on your health. This was a really ambitious project, but I got a lot of satisfaction out of doing everything myself, and it looks so good in photos and videos. The fact that the more expensive BMW 4 Series came with the red dash from the factory always made the black dashboard in the 3 Series look cheap and incomplete to me. In my opinion, if you're going to go with a bold interior color like red, why not go all in?